Hi, I'm Robert Greaves, and this is The Point. Today we're going to go through part 2 of our conversation with Michael Barth. So tell me now about your expedition. What kind of vehicles did you use and what kind of equipment, and how many people were there on this expedition?
We were similar in number to the original Chapman numbers. I think he had around 45 all told. He basically tapped a different expert from each department of the museum and other people from within the Explorers Club ranks. And it was one of the first major interdisciplinary field expeditions. So it kind of set a standard for that as well. We had close to 40 people as well, but some of the old jobs that would have been there for, on Chapman's crew, like the cartographer, no longer really exist, today with modern technology. And we also used a mechanized center column, four-wheel drive vehicles, allowed us to cover a great amount of terrain that way. Would have been unimaginable to him, but the real innovation was in the deployment of technology that we used. So basically, the easiest way to explain it is that we took NASA imaging and mapping technologies that had previously only been used to understand the geography of Mars, and we asked, what if we use this technology to help us prospect for dinosaur fossils?
Wow.
So it became about finding dinosaur fossils, but ultimately the result was we have some tools that allow us to find anything on the surface anywhere. So it was a huge success. We probably were able to cover about 100 years worth of prospecting ground within almost a 4-week period.
My goodness.
And so it started with very high definition topographical maps that were produced by NASA's Aster Array from orbit. And then at specific fossil locations on the ground, we then flew all manner of sort of homemade sensors on drones to get to sort of fill in the gaps. So we started with a very detailed God's eye view of the terrain. And then we went in and filled in all of the hyper-local data about the geology and the atmosphere. And pretty much, if it was there, we captured it.
And I understand that you found things that probably Chapman had overlooked.
Chapman certainly would have overlooked, but paleontology over the intervening 100 years until we got there had also overlooked. Part of that was a function of the technology, but it was also just having so many explorers in the field. We partnered with Mongolia's Institute of Paleontology and Geology. So we had the father of Mongolian paleontology with us on our team, and his team was integrated with the Explorers Club team. And he's the leading authority on Cretaceous period dinosaurs in that region. So talk about a master class, but that's the gentleman that taught us how to prospect for fossils. But unlike the IPG guys, we weren't encumbered by the narrowness of their field of specialization. So we were looking all over the landscape. And we were finding fossils in places where no one's ever looked for them, because over the last 100 years, most fossils, they look in the same band of geology. So we really sort of blew things up over there. We made a lot of extra work for them from an authentication standpoint. And so it resulted in several new species being found, resulted in hundreds and hundreds of fossils being found in places where they hadn't been found before. And then also something of a technology toolbox of both data collection instruments, but then also like a modern map that's effectively a treasure map of their cultural treasures that can help them set their priorities for prospecting for the next the next 100 years, hopefully.
Wow. What was the most surprising thing? What surprised you the most about the expedition?
There were so many things. The Gobi Desert is one of the harshest, most impressive, most vast landscapes I've ever been in. So you feel incredibly insignificant in this ocean of sand and dust and rock. And it's frankly, it's incredible anybody finds anything there. It really is a needle in a haystack scenario, and you're wandering under the scorching hot sun looking for indications of fossils. I think the average ambient ground temperature when we were there was approaching 130 degrees.
Wow.
And hot. Yeah, it was quite hard work. But the most thrilling part was definitely my first fossil discovery, and it wasn't an important one. It might have been because at first, when you start off, as your eyes are adjusting to the pattern recognition that's required to find these, you start off with some false positives. So you'll find an interesting looking rock, and you'll bring it over to one of the geologists or paleontologists, and they'll look at it for a second, and they toss it, and you become quite dejected, and then you wander back out into the desert. But it takes after a day or two, then it starts clicking, and you're finding fossils everywhere. But my first discovery wasn't an important one. It was a velociraptor fossil in a section of the Gobi called Ush, and it might have been the 1,000th example of that fossil, but it was my first, and every hair on my back of my neck stood up when I found it. I knew exactly I was holding something that was over 100 million years old, that at one point was walking around on that very ground. And so just the thrill of making a real discovery that maybe in some small way helps to advance the acquisition of knowledge that helps the human species possibly endure is thrilling. And then my subsequent discoveries of a Tarbosaurus egg and some other more major finds, some of the new species that hadn't been encountered yet. Those were thrilling, but ultimately not as thrilling as the first discovery.
It sounds pretty incredible. And at night, did the temperature plunge and get very cold?
Not cold enough. No. If you had wandered into our camp around lunchtime, it was everybody was just laying all over the place, trying to get a little bit of shade. It's too hot to stay in the tents, during siesta. But the evening, we got a little break in the evening. We had one of the most exciting moments towards the end. It seems like all of the bad things happen right as you're about to get home. But we had a biblical sandstorm come out of nowhere, and it effectively swept our campsite off the top of the mountain we were at. And when the wind kicks up, all of the critters in the desert are also seeking shelter at the same time we are. And so we were sent some people to pull down the cook tent before that would get blown away. And a family of scorpions had beat our guys to it. And one of our fellows, he had lost his shoes because it came upon us so quickly. So he went in barefoot, got stung by a scorpion. We had to do some triage in the middle of the sandstorm, get him prepped. And while that was happening, another Explorers Club member got hit in the head with a flying tent pole, and that was from the mess tent. So it was a substantial pole, and it would have killed an average person. But he's 6'8" or 6'9", so still got a good concussion. So then we had to prep two people in the middle of the sandstorm, had to pack them up into a vehicle, and had to drive basically line of sight in the pitch black 50 kilometers to try to hit a medical attention center, and they had the anti-venom, and everybody ended up being okay.
That's it for this episode of The Point. Continue the dialogue with us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.